Hi, folks. It's William Everhart with Quarantine Studio, here once again in the studio. Now, today we're coming to you from a different part of the studio. In fact, this part of the studio, very few people have ever even seen. This is my work area where I actually edit our videos, I create all of our artwork. For our boxes and our website. And I do all of that magical stuff right here inside of this room. And it also doubles as my audio recording booth. So, like I said, this is a place that not many people get a chance to see, and probably with good reason. Now, I wanted to bring you in here today to show you just some of the things that we go through to make our products stand out. And one of those things we do is we try to develop really attractive looking box art. And that is my job, or at least one of my jobs as art director here at Quarantine Studio. And so today we want to give you a little sneak peek of that. This is not going to be a tutorial on how to use a piece of software or how we go about doing every little thing, but I do want to show you some of the steps that we go through and some of the time and the energy that we spend to get these things right. So sit back and enjoy, and let's get on with the making of this particular product, which is called the Templar's Reign. Well, this is my desktop, and I'm using Adobe Illustrator to lay out my box art. Now, I don't exclusively use Illustrator. In fact, for this particular box, I'm going to have to step over into Adobe Photoshop. And so even if you've never heard of Illustrator, most everyone has heard of Photoshop, and they know the power that it yields. And so what I need to do here is, for this particular box, I am going to create a distressed flag of the Templar Knights. And we're going to wrap it, I don't know, maybe all the way around the box, or at least a good portion of the box. But before I jump into Photoshop, I wanted to show you some of my reference material. So I'm going to jump over to another file here that I have in the browser. And so this is a collection of reference material that I'm going to use. And I'm going to composite these together to create something that looks a little bit more like this. And so this is where I'm drawing my inspiration from. This is not a real distressed flag. It is actually a photo manipulation of a flag graphic over a piece of wood. And so we're going to create something very similar to this. Once again, this is not going to be a video tutorial on exactly every step to do this. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights to show you some of the steps we go through. Now, some of you may be asking, well, William, where do you get those references from? Well, I start here at Pixabay. And the reason I use Pixabay is because this is stock imagery. It's completely free, and most of it is Creative Commons 0, I believe. So there's no attribution required. You can just use the images. Now, some of them you have to give the artist a little bit of a nudge there, a little wink, wink, and let them know, that you're using their product. But for the most part, it's free. So as you can see here, there's all kinds of textures, and I was just looking for some textures that had some peeling paint. Now, the one thing I did not like about this particular one was the fact that this is like lap boards. So the boards, you can actually see the horizontal lines there in the boards. And that to me was just a little more than what I wanted to deal with. So I just kind of searched through this for some other textures. I was looking at things like rust and chipping paint and stuff like that. And I ended up with quite a big collection of these. And you'll see how all this comes together in just a moment. Well, here we are in Adobe Photoshop, and so one of the first things I need to do is lay out the red cross that takes up a good part of the flag. So I'm just going to measure that out and pick a nice red color here. I wanted something kind of deep red and kind of worn and that sort of thing. And of course, I'll add some effects to this later, but I needed a good basis. So I thought a somewhat warm, kind of a dark red would work well. And so I'm just filling these areas with that color. Now I'll step away from this for a moment and start adding some texture. So one of the first textures that I want to add is a canvas texture, and that'll be the basis for the flag material. So I had several canvas textures here, and so I'll just pick one of those that I like, and we're going to put that in here. And so there it is. May have to do a little bit of scaling here on it and get it into place and just kind of get it lined up the way I want it. Well, now I move the red in front of it and I apply a little bit of a transparency effect to the red so we can see the texture underneath it. And one of those textures is this seam, and I just really wasn't happy with where it was, but I did like it. I thought I could use it. So what I did is I just copied it, moved it over a little bit, and I'm going to duplicate it again here, and I'm going to put it on the edges of the red strips because in the real world, when this flag would have been created, it wouldn't have been created like it is today. This would actually be one solid sheet of material, and then these two red strips would be separate pieces of material, probably even three pieces, and they would all have been stitched together to form this flag. And so I wanted to recreate that look, and that's what I did here by just repurposing a texture that was already in that background image. And here I am just kind of cleaning up some of those edges here, and I apologize, it jumps around quite a bit, but we don't want to sit here for the entire length of time that I was editing this file. So here I am just kind of cleaning this up. These seams would never overlap, so I decided to go with the horizontal seams. Those should be removed, and so that's what I'm doing here. And then I noticed there was a lot of this grunge kind of inside and outside of the seam. So I'm going to go through and clean that up as well. Just get rid of some of that and try to randomize it just a little bit more. Well, I'm finishing up the cleanup here on the cross part, and that looks pretty good. Now we need to add maybe some more texture to the background itself because this is just for the red part. So once we start putting the rest of this in here, it'll start to look more like a flag. One of the things I noticed is that my red was just perfectly straight boxes and these seams are certainly not. So now I'm going back in and erasing some of that red to match the seams from the flag texture. And here we'll turn that off, the red on and off, just kind of get a look at what's going on. I'll bring the texture back and we'll play around with some other textures here. So I'm going to pull in a couple more of finer grain textures to add to that canvas texture that I have there in the background. And I've got some here a little large. We'll scale those down so they'll fit my graphic. And then I'll turn everything back on and we'll start playing around with some of the blending modes so that we can start to see some of the other textures, falling through the other textures and kind of interacting here. Now, the last thing I need to do is get rid of that seam. So I'm going to use this thing called a patch tool here to get rid of it. It's really amazing, really quick and easy. And so basically it's kind of faking it there. So look at that. It's amazing, right? Next, we got to play around with a little bit more of the textures here. Well, you never stick with just one texture. There's always piles and piles of texture, but this texture is what I'm going to use to really create the distress where the flag is being peeled apart here. So the other textures were purely to get the feel of the linen and the flag material itself. Now we're going to start distressing this flag. And so once again, I'm going to play around with creating some new layers over here. I do a lot of this type of work. It just kind of helps me create kind of like a backup of the work that I've done. And now I'm playing around with using these two layers, the peeling paint and then a composite of my flag to try to figure out, what's going to work best here to create this distressed look. And so I think I've got something here, at least a starting point. And now I'll start playing around with the number of cracks and stuff that are in this distress, because as I start messing around with this, I can see that, well, I got to remove that kind of a rock background that's behind whatever this paint was painted on, like concrete or something like that. I've got to get rid of that. And I also, I've got to deal with some of these cracks because it's going to be a little too much, I think. So I'm going to play around here a little bit with some blend modes and try to get a little closer to the look that I'm after. And then I'm going to start working on some of the details in here. So here's all the cracked texture, and anything basically that's black is going to be hidden or removed from the flag. And so it's a little too much detail. So here I'm going to start cleaning up some of that detail. And I'm just using a thing called calculations to kind of help me find the look that I'm after here. And what I'm looking for is as close to a pure black and white image that I can possibly get. And so calculations kind of helps you do that. And then you can pull it back in. It creates a completely separate file, and you can kind of pull that right back into Photoshop and then use it as a mask. And basically the mask is what is used to hide certain areas of the image. And so there we go. That's a much better look. And now you can see it's just like cutting out pieces of the flag. And then the white background is just there temporarily. I'm cleaning up some of the cracks here. I felt like there was maybe a little too much distress, especially on the top and maybe the left-hand side here. So I'm just kind of filling in some of those cracks there. And when I fill those in, it just reveals the original flag that I created earlier. And so it just kind of brings that back. All right, so starting to look pretty good here. Starting to come together, adding a little more grunginess to it now, playing around with what they call blend modes. And you can get some really amazing effects here. Sorry for the snapping between them so quick, but I did want to speed this video up a bit. So we're getting there. We'll probably jump ahead here now and see what's next. All right, well, what's next is going to be yet another texture here. So let me pull in this texture. Once again, just an extra layer of grit and grime that we can add to the box art here. So I'm going to lay this in over it. This is going to represent kind of the burning of the flag here. So you'll see that the one side there, the right-hand side, is a little more crusty looking, is a little more burnt looking, it's darker. And then now the left-hand side is a little bit lighter. So this flag has certainly been through the battlefield here, and I wanted to give it a little more of that look. And so I'm just going to play around with some of the settings here and, kind of dial this in a little bit more. I don't remember all of the settings that I was doing here. This one, I'm trying to get a little more of the burnt, crispy edges here, so I'm using kind of a custom filter for that. That's in Photoshop, and you kind of fine-tune it the way you want. And so it starts to, like I said, kind of highlight and shadow those edges where the peeling paint texture is. And once again, you can see the brown, golden brown kind of concrete texture. That will disappear too when I'm all done with it, but that's just part of the layering process here. So we'll just kind of continue on here. I'm going to break out a paintbrush here and start clearing away some of that texture that I just brought in. So in this case, I'm using a mask to do that. I like using masks in Photoshop. They're a non-destructive way to make edits and changes to your content. Non-destructive just meaning that I can save this, I can go away from it for 6 weeks, come back to it and say, you know what, I don't like that idea. Let me change this. And it's very easy to change it. I don't have to scrap the whole project and start over again. So really cool process. If you want to learn more about masking, check it out. There's tons of videos on YouTube about it. I've been using them for years. Been using Photoshop for like 30 plus years. I remember the very first version. That's when I started using it and fell in love with it. And have been using it ever since. It's a great tool. And so anywho, we're just adding a little more scorching and burning here. I'm just doing this manually with a brush tool. And now we're going to start working on, maybe getting rid of some of that other content back there in the background. And so you can see we're getting right here where I'm painting now, I'm kind of etching out a little more of these details. The little gray checkerboard that you see back there, that's actually what they call transparency. So, I'm toggling another layer on and off so you can see the concrete there. But that transparency will end up translating to either white or whatever color background that I'm going to use on the box here. So I'm just picking another color, and now I'm going to bring this over into Illustrator so I can find what color I'm using for my box. And so I'm using a specific black in there, and so I want to make sure that I'm matching that same color. And I've come back over here to Photoshop, and I've put that in as my background. And now, once again, just a little more scrubbing here to clean up some of the little particles. I felt like too much detail would be a little too distracting. And so it's starting to look good. I'm actually liking it pretty well, but the one thing that I think is kind of missing here is some of the tonal properties here, the color. And so now I'm working on kind of toning that down a little bit, making it a little more earthy. Linen has kind of a little bit of a brown or tan texture to or color to it. And so I'm just trying to add that in here, kind of aging in this a little bit more. And I think that really starts to make it jump out and look like something that is really old and really worn. So just throwing that in here. And now I'm going to go ahead and export this into a format that I can use for my box art. And so I could use a Photoshop file, but not everybody, as far as a printer, can use a Photoshop file. So I like to export them in a more universal format. And so now here we go. We're going to place the Photoshop file, the composited Photoshop file here into Illustrator. And we'll just kind of play around with the sizing and positioning here. And I think we've just about got it. Playing around with some of the other elements in here. It's okay. I'm not crazy about it sitting straight up like that, so I'm going to offset it here a little bit and maybe make it a little larger, wrap it across multiple panels here. It may not go across the entire box, but hey, that's totally okay. I kind of like that kind of half wrap look. And so now we're going to play around with masking it here inside of Illustrator. So these boxes, it doesn't print one solid flat image. It gets cut out to the box shape. And so that's what I'm doing here, playing around with that. I'm going to make sure this only covers these first two panels here. And so I'm creating another type of mask here. And so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to reposition, make sure that I am getting kind of the look that I want. You got to remember that when this box folds up, you're only going to see one panel at a time. So that's kind of important here. And so looks like that's about it. Well, there you have it, folks. A brief look behind the scenes here at Quarantine Studios at the making of box art for our products. Now, in this case, it's the Templar's Reign. And if you've enjoyed this video, then by all means, hit that subscribe button. If you'd like to learn more about our products and learn about them before anyone else does, then head on over to our website and subscribe to our newsletter. In it, you will be the first person to know about upcoming projects, and you'll get the first opportunity to snag one for yourself. And as an extra bonus that only happens with our subscribers, you will get discount coupons that you can apply towards the purchase of upcoming projects or even existing ones. So that's it for today. I hope to see you again very soon. My name is William Everhart, and as always, beast wishes to you all, and I'll see you again soon.